Right, for the hands, we're going to have, I think it'd be nice if we had this hand, right hand pointing, so the finger pointing. You can do both hands the same, like that, if you want to start with. But if you want to be adventurous and see if you can go with like a pointing finger, you could wrap these fingers round a bit more if you imagine your hand like that. So if you wanted to, it might be easier, particularly if you've got a very wide-grained wood, because obviously you want the graining of your wood to be going this direction. The moment you start putting fingers going that way, they are going to be a little bit vulnerable to snapping off. So you might want to adjust it and tie it round like that even, or you can just keep them both like that. We have these extensions on here for when you're holding your hand puppet. You need to grip the hands with your thumb and little finger, so we need something to push against rather than just having material wrapped around here. I find it's helpful if you have these extensions on the back, and also if they're curved, if you imagine you'll see as it comes out, but with the hands being cut out of that block with these extensions being here, if you imagine they're curved slightly like this, when your finger's in there, because your finger's got a curve on it, it'll just be a little bit more comfortable rather than just having a flat piece that your finger pushes against. So if you cut in a slight curve into that, I might do that with a drill on mine first. I might set these out and then actually drill out this hole here, just to save a little bit of time. But they can always be can always be carved in afterwards. It'd be good carving practice if you want to put that in afterwards. So it's just a matter of laying out these on here. I've pushed these on my drawing here, pushed these really close together because I want to get them, being stingy on wood, I want to get them together on this one block, so I've really pushed them close together. Also, it means that you can cut two at once on this profile as well, even though obviously these fingers on the other one are going to be bent over. It won't matter if you cut those out on that profile, and then because when you go to the other profile these will get nipped off anyway. So you might want to have a bit more room between the hands. To say, it's just the reason I'm doing it this way is just because this is the block I've got, and it just happens to be that it only just fits if they're really tight together, so that's why I've done that. So I'll attach this onto here, and then I'm going to cut these out on the scroll saw, which is, if you've seen some of the other videos that we've got up, similar to a bandsaw. It's just for cutting smaller sections of wood. I mean, this is about as thick as it can manage, really. It might even struggle with this a little bit because it's quite thick, but it's particularly good for hands and fingers detailing. Also, on the drawing here, I've got these fingers separated. I'm not going to carve them separated. They'll be joined up. Particularly on hand puppets, there's no real need to have them separated. You can do, but particularly because these are quite small, it's going to be a pain to get in there and sort of clean them up anyway. So they'll be defined, but there won't actually be a gap between them. So there we go. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'll glue this on and cut them out on the scroll saw. So here you can see why I kept the piece that I cut off earlier. It's to keep, obviously we need that pattern, and you need to keep a square section whenever possible when you're cutting two profiles. So although that, because it was so close to the edge, that had to come off when I was cutting, I was able to put it back on. So whenever you can do that, that's useful to do. Some thin tape on there just holds it in place whilst it's cutting. Obviously you will cut through the tape and it'll free it up, so you might need to reapply it depending on the amount of cuts you're going to do. But anyway, as you can see, the scroll saw is a useful tool. If you had to have just one tool, saw, then obviously the bandsaw is the better one to get, because it can do the bigger profiles that you'll need for heads and certainly bodies on marionettes as well. The scroll saw is really good for the smaller detail work, but it will only cut sort of, my saw here can only cut about 45mm thick stock, really. It probably can go to 50. It depends on what timber you're using, but certainly on the lime, about 45 is really its limit. So it's really good for smaller parts, hands, maybe neck parts, things like that, but it obviously can't handle a full-size head section. But you get a much cleaner cut, a much finer cut, so you can do detail work really nicely. You could of course, if you're laminating your puppet together, 2 or 3 different thicknesses of wood to make up the head, then you possibly could use this, but you'll still have, even if you're doing that in one direction, you'll still have the thickness on the other plane anyway. So that's the hands cut out, and then we do the head, which obviously I do need to use the bandsaw for, so it's obviously a bigger bit of timber. Again, this footage is speeded up. Obviously I don't go mad pushing the thing through the bandsaw. You need to keep control of it and let the blade do the work, so you don't really want to be forcing it. If the blade gets tired, then you have to sort of put a little bit more pressure on it, but that just means your blade is getting blunt and it needs replacing. So you should sort of let the blade do the work as much as you can. Obviously it's a thin blade and it's cutting through 4 and a bit inch timber here, so it's going to struggle a little bit on occasion, and of course the guides gets in the way of the nose. But it's the same process that we used before on the marionette. You cut one profile and then you use the opposite side to get the second profile. So you need to make sure that you keep a square section again, as before. You will struggle, and it's dangerous to be cutting when your shape is not square, so it needs to be sitting flat on the table. So if you've already cut out one profile and it's all lumpy and bumpy, you're not going to get a square cut for the second profile, so it's not going to be useful to do it. But also it's going to be dangerous, because there's risk of the blade sort of grabbing in and flipping the wood about and all that sort of thing. So you've got to keep this square section for as long as you can, and if that means re-sticking bits on as you go, then do it like that. But again, if you haven't got a bandsaw, you need to sort of find someone who's got one, a college or something like that, and then let them do the cutting. Pay them a little bit to do the cutting for you, because obviously they'll be hopefully be more skilled at using the bandsaw than you will if you haven't got one. So most places will hopefully do that for you. If you ask nicely, it might cost you a couple of pounds or dollars or whatever to do that, but they should be able to do that for you, and it will save a lot of time. You can get to the same position
than we'll end up with by doing it all with your gouges. But you know, this takes 10 minutes to cut, 5-10 minutes to cut out both profiles on here. And if you were doing that with your hand gouges and chisels, then you'd be, you know, that would probably be an hour or more's work, and it probably wouldn't be quite so accurate as well. So worthwhile doing if you can this way, but obviously if you can't, whatever reason, then you'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way. You can use a hand fret saw, which is a similar, you know, a similar type sort of bandsaw. It's or a scroll saw, and you can do it that way. But when you're cutting big timber like this, you know, that's going to struggle a little bit. But you can always give that a go using hand saws to get to the finish. So here it is. The footage is slowing down again now, so you can see I've cut pretty much the majority of the timber off there. You won't always get perhaps everything you need to get off due to the angles that you're cutting or the sections of the wood, but you should be able to get most of it off. And you can see the sections that I've glued on. Really, there's not going to actually be much of those left by the time the carving comes, but it gives you a good place to start your carving from. You know, a lot of the wood's gone, and it gives you some nice reference points to work from.